Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this short video we're going to discuss the most important updates that took place during the previous night of the local time. And first we're going to start with Robotyne direction. We have some details, and probably the most important update is that the Russians still haven't managed to establish a powerful or stable foothold in the village itself. The Ukrainians during the previous days managed to repel every single Russian attack. Just yesterday we discussed the video of how the Ukrainians managed to capture five Russian soldiers on the western street on Vulitsa Cherivna, this one, and the Russians, the footholds in the streets they managed to establish control over during the previous days. They were forced to abandon and to fall back in direction of Kopany and Novoprokopovka. Few mappers have updated their maps in this area, but most of them shows just additional progress along this tree line, and that's it. So the Ukrainians very likely we can't say that the Ukrainians managed to stabilize the front line in Robotyne. The only thing the Ukrainians managed to do is to redeploy a significant number of reserves and reinforcements from Novodanilovka to the south and from Malotokmachka to the south in direction of Verbova. As soon as the Ukrainians redeployed the forces, the Russians took a decision to fall back with the purpose first to reduce arrived reinforcements, and after that to make another attempt. Interesting update we got from Robotyne. Another one is that the Russians start publishing the videos of prisoners of war. In this video we can see a young guy who was captured somewhere among the trenches to the south of Robotyne. But the most important part is that this soldier was captured by the Russians, and he belonged to 141st Infantry Brigade from Strategical Reserves. And this is very important because during the winter period of time the Ukrainians were forced to use two brigades from Strategical Reserves. The first case we spotted and discovered in the vicinity of Avdiivka. The Ukrainians were forced to redeploy 153rd Mechanized Brigade for stabilization of the front line in Avdiivka, and today we got the second confirmation that Ukrainians were forced to use, let's say, spring brigades during the winter military campaign. Furthermore, the Western sources confirms, like CNN, that the Russians managed to concentrate up to 50,000 soldiers on Zaporizhia direction, and the Western sources continue saying that very likely the Russians are planning to start something significant on this direction. Now we are moving further. We have additional video from Huliaipole. Huliaipole is the closest, let's say, logistic hub to Orekhov. The Russians bombed Orekhov heavily, so that's why the Ukrainians can have and can use the warehouses and ammo depots of Huliaipole, let's say, to stretch the, let's say, support and not to concentrate everything in one place. Probably the Russians during the previous days managed to discover the Ukrainian ammo depot in Huliaipole that Ukrainians were using for supporting forces in Robotyne, and as a result of FAB strikes, that ammo depot was destroyed. Very interesting details and updates are coming from Novomikhailovka direction, from Pobieda and Novomikhailovka itself. Since the beginning of February, the Russians increased the pressure in the village, and we see significant number of details and updates that we received just during the February. First, the Russians during the months managed to establish complete control over the tree line that located to the east of the village and to create a broad front line. And starting of probably 18th or 19th of February, the Russians launched the active ground operation inside of the village. And according to many sources, the Russians managed to not just enter the village, but also to force the Ukrainians to step back and to create a strong foothold. And according to information we have, currently the Russians control. You know that from different sources, the information differs from one source to another. Some sources are saying that the Russians controls just the farm on the eastern part. Some sources are saying that the Russian controls everything that located to the right of the road. And some sources are saying that the Russians controls farms and the northern part, which confirms that there are still fog of war and the Ukrainians makes attempts to counterattack. Anyway, according to my understanding of the situation, currently the Russians control something like this: the northern street, Pobieda Street, and the farms that located to the east of the village. So not so much left for the Ukrainians, but the clash still continues. And very likely today the Russians will complete the battle for Pobieda and will force the Ukrainians to fall back further to Konstantinovka and Novomikhailovka. So today is decisive day in the battle of Pobieda, and very likely the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation will provide us during the daily update the report about complete control over the village. We see some intensifying of actions in the vicinity of Georgievka and Krasnogorovka. When talking about Krasnogorovka, during the previous months we received significant number of updates, and mainly the Russians were bombing, as you can see, the southern and the central part of the stronghold. After the fall of Avdiivka, after almost complete fall of Pervomaiska and Georgievka, obviously the next Russian step, the next Russian goal, Krasnogorovka, is going to be the next Russian goal and the next Russian direction. Today, during the previous night, we got lots of updates of how the Russians were bombing and attacking Ukraine 5 positions in high-rise buildings on the last floors, anti-tank positions, machine gun positions, and sniper positions, which also confirms something like the beginning of clearing operation and creating the safe road for further offensive operation. On Marinka Georgievka direction, we got the video of how the Russians managed to destroy another Ukrainian Leopard on this direction between Kurakhova and Georgievka Maximilianovka. As a result of artillery strike or lancet strike, that tank was destroyed or damaged, and after that the Ukrainians made few attempts to evacuate this tank, and very likely they managed to do this. But I'll remind you that this is the second tank, that second Leopard that was destroyed during the previous 2 days. The first one was destroyed also in the vicinity of Pobieda, and this is the second one. When talking about Avdiivka, we can say that the clearing operation in this area continues. The Russians still able to find prisoner Ukrainians who are hiding in the basements and among the buildings. During the previous 2 days, the Russians managed to partly clear the territory. They managed to, let's say, discover and to destroy more than 350 mines. The Russians are saying that every single building was mined. It will take significant time to complete the clearing operation. The sources are saying that the Russians are going to need 3 weeks or even more. Furthermore, the Russians continue attacks in the direction of Nivoyska, and very likely, probably since the beginning of this year and probably for the previous 6 months, we received the first geolocated video of how the Russians were bombing Nivolska itself, which confirms that the Russians got as close as possible to the village, and now they started artillery preparation before the next operation on the ground. So very likely that within the next week we're going to receive complete control over Pobieda by the Russian forces, which will also confirms additional progress in Pervomaiska and some problems for Krasnogorovka as well. Now we are moving to another important thing. The Russian authorities are saying, military authorities today reported that if the situation continues developing the same way as it currently develops, then the special military operation will be ended by September of 2024. So today the February, so around 7 months left for special military operation if the Western countries like the United States of America will continue not supporting of Ukraine. When talking about Bakhmut Artyomovsk theater, we have additional updates. The sources reported about the Russian progress, a few more attacks in direction of Chasov Yar. The Ukrainian sources published additional videos of FPV drone strikes against the Russian forces, which confirms additional progress and some control over the territories and the strongholds between Chasov Yar, Bogdanovka, and Popovo Forest. We haven't received anything from Ivanovskaya. Now we are moving to Bilohorivka direction. After few attempts of the storming of the village, the Russians stuck on their positions right on the edge of the village. They haven't entered the city. Then, regarding the reports from the sources that the Russians captured few streets, maybe the Russians entered a few streets, but then they were forced to fall back due to very big risks and very big problems of controlling the territory under Ukrainian fire. And now the Russians brought those flamethrower systems to the line of combat contact and start bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions before the next wave of attack. On this video, for example, we can see another TOS flamethrower bombing of the hill of the landfill, somewhere between the industrial area filtration station and Bilohorivka itself. This is the first stronghold that the Russians need to establish control over to continue offensive operation further. Just yesterday we got almost the same video from a little bit to the south, from the landfills to the south of the original we just watched, and we can see the same story. The Russians were bombing the Ukrainian positions heavily with TOS flamethrower systems, trying to suppress and destroy the Ukrainian defense belt, machine gun positions, Ukrainian positions, and after few days more of TOS flamethrower strikes, very likely the Russians will start the operation on the ground. But once again, gained, yet the Russians haven't managed to establish, let's say, a stable foothold inside of the village itself. And now we are moving to big Kupinsk direction. We haven't received anything from the southern Kupinsk direction, just few FPV drone strikes from the Ukrainian side, and either we haven't received anything from the northern Kupinsk direction. Interesting details continue coming from Liptsi, the village that located on the border lines between Kharkiv and Belgorod. The Russian sources published 3 geolocated videos of strikes against the Ukrainian positions in the area. Let's take a look at them. Liptsi is very important village or city or town for the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians were using these, let's say, positions lots of times in the past. I'll remind you that from Liptsi, the Ukrainians, using a Patriot system, managed to brought down the Russian Il-76 aircraft. Later, from the same town, the Ukrainians were bombing Belgorod with Vampire multi-launch rocket systems. A few days ago, the Ukrainians redeployed additional batch of Vampires multi-launch rocket system with the purpose to bomb Belgorod as well, but the Russians managed to discover the Ukrainian movements, and after that they start bombing and attacking this territory heavily. And according to information we have, the Russians managed to destroy the Ukrainian positions, to destroy the Ukrainian let's say, a warehouse, ammo depot, and probably the Russians managed to destroy the Ukrainian, let's say, this is the warehouse, by the way. The Russians, as you can see, were conducting a reconnaissance operation. They tried to find where the Ukrainians concentrate and collect their missiles and ammo, and they discovered additional vehicle entering this area, and after that they destroyed. So maybe the Russians managed to prevent the further bombing of Belgorod that Ukrainians are planning to make in a few days. And probably the most important update from the Ukrainian side, the Western sources confirms that the US will train 12 Ukrainian pilots this year. 8 are currently in training. So the thing is that when exactly the Ukrainians are going to receive the first F-16s, and very likely they're going to receive them during the before the upcoming summer. And that's it for the short video. Military Summer channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day.